folks? Welcome to another episode of Technical Knockout, the hardcore casual MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hussein. Doing a solo episode today. We are going to be talking about UFC Denver, Namajunas versus Cortez. Should be a pretty fun fight here at women's flyweight at the top of the bill. They are in Denver, so as always, we're going to be very cognizant of any fighter's cardio concerns because at altitude, we really see that come into effect. We've seen it countless times before, most notably Salt Lake City cards, Denver cards, Mexico City. It's very frequent that when the UFC goes to these places that are high in altitude, especially in cards where there's a lot of short notice fights, we see guys gas out and either get finished or end up in very sloppy brawls. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to go down the card real quick and just kind of give my thoughts on a few of the fights. There are some pretty interesting fights on this card. Starting with the main event, Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez. Cortez coming in on short notice. It was supposed to be Namajunas versus Macy Barber, and I think that would have been a really good fight. I'm not mad at this matchup, though. Tracy Cortez is a very hot prospect. She looks like she has a lot of well-rounded tools and more than anything knows when to use them in the fights. She's been pretty strong in the clinch, leaning on her opponents, making them tired. She's a very strong wrestler as well, comes from a wrestling background and obviously has some jiu-jitsu experience as well. Her striking leaves a little bit to be desired, but she's certainly no slouch there either. She kind of tailors her game to her opponents. Now, that being said, she is coming in on very short notice, so I don't know if she's had a lot of time to really make a game plan to beat Rose. That being said, Rose is one of those people. I mean, obviously, if you're watching this podcast, if you're familiar with MMA, you're probably familiar with Rose Namajunas. She's another super well-rounded fighter and, one of the GOATs of women's MMA for sure. The things that she's done in the sport is nothing short of incredible. Two-time strawweight champion, knocked out the two claims to women's GOAT for that division in Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang. She is 4-0 against those women, with 2 knockouts and 2 decision wins. Both those decision wins were close fights, but I felt like she did enough to win both. The Weili one was a little iffy, but even still, she had a great performance in that fight. So Namajunas, has great boxing, a great leaping left hook, nice leg kicks, very crispy punches. She comes from the Trevor Whitman camp. Although she's no longer with Trevor Whitman, she definitely carries those tools through her career. Very strong jab. She's tough as nails, very gritty. We saw her against Manon Fiorot put on a very gritty performance in that fight when she broke her hand in the first round and continued to fight very well throughout the rest of the fight. Even though she lost that fight, I think she, demonstrated great heart and grit. More than anything, I think she came up as a grappler. She was famous for having a flying armbar in Invicta before she got to the UFC. And after that was kind of known as a submission specialist, but then her striking really became the forefront of her game, especially after knocking out, multiple-time champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So Rose certainly has a well-rounded game. She seems to have more power at strawweight versus flyweight. Girls at 125 take her punches a lot better. We'll see how that plays out in this matchup. Cortez really hasn't had her chin tested like that. She showed great toughness, but Namajunas does not seem like the hitter that she was at strawweight, up a weight class at flyweight. So I'm not sure, if there's any chance of Namajunas knocking out Cortez. That being said, I do think that Cortez leaves herself open defensively a lot of times when she's, approaching her opponents. And Namajunas is one of the best counter strikers in any women's division. So I do feel like there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Rose to get off her strikes here. I think if the fight goes to the ground, it's going to be pretty interesting to see if Cortez can out-muscle Namajunas. I personally lean towards Namajunas having the grappling advantage as well. And because they are in Denver, where Rose trains full-time, you'd think that she would be better acclimated to the altitude. And considering that she was training for this date and Cortez just picked up the fight on short notice. I really do feel like the cards are stacked against Tracy Cortez in this fight. Now, after laying all that out, there is a huge X factor in this fight, which is Rose's mentality, her mental state. Not to overplay things too much, but she has been kind of a head case, so to speak, in her career, psyching herself out in certain fights and kind of losing the will to fight at moments, particularly when she fought Carla Esparza. You saw that come to the forefront in that second Esparza fight. It looked like it was Rose versus Rose out there, and Carla was just, the canvas. But, fighting in Denver in what should be like a hometown crowd, coming off of her win over Amanda Hebus, I think she's in a good spot right now. And I think unless, Tracy Cortez does something to like psych her out, which I really don't see happening, I do expect Rose to get this one done. I am kind of leaning towards a late finish because Cortez, I've seen her kind of gas out in the third rounds before. And she is fighting in altitude, and this is her first 5-round fight in the UFC. That being said, she has amazing experience for somebody with as many fights as she has. Excuse me. So yeah, I mean, Cortez has really great experience. She's fought a who's who of women's flyweight fighters. She's fought Melissa Gatto, Jasmine Jazu Davicius, Justine Kish, Vanessa Mello, Maria Agapova, Erin Blanchfield, and she's beat all these women. So she only has one loss on her record, and that was her first fight. So she's on a pretty lengthy win streak here. Thing is that she's not fighting very often, so it's good to see her kind of come in the short notice spot. Now, all that being said, I am going to be picking Rose in this fight. I just feel like she has more tools to win. I think, she's in a good spot physically in Denver. I'm not happy with her coaches. Her being with Pat Barry as her head coach instead of Trevor Whitman really does not sit well with me. I don't like it when fighters bring their families into their corner, especially when they make their family their entire corner. So, although Pat Barry has a ton of experience as a fighter, I don't know if that's such a great idea. But that being said, I do feel like Rose has the physical tools and the experience edge in this matchup, and I believe she'll get it done. Probably by decision, but it might be a late finish if Cortez gasses out and Rose is still there. But, Rose hasn't had the best cardio either, so we'll see what happens. But I'm going to be picking Rose. Going to the co-main event, you have a awesome fight. I really love this fight between Santiago Ponzinibbio and Muslim Salikhov. Both guys are kind of aging welterweight vets. Both of them have had some trouble with their durability as of late, and have had some problems with injuries as well. So I kind of like that they're matching these two guys up against each other. I think it's a good fight for both of them. Ponzinibbio has a solid jab, really solid jab, good leg kicks, and a decent grappler to boot. Muslim Salikhov also is a very defensively responsible fighter. He likes to pump the jab, pull back, and throw a kick, or pump the jab, pull back, throw a two. Big fan of spinning attacks as well as Salikhov, but, I do feel like as he's aged, he's lost some of that explosiveness that he had early in his career, as is tradition with any fighter. So that being said, I'm really not sure who to pick in this fight. They have Salikhov as a big underdog, which I'm not really sure why. I feel like if anything, Ponzinibbio might be a little bit more washed at this point. But, I think a safer bet is for it to go over 1.5. I think neither of these guys is going to be really pushing the action too much because both of them know that they are mortal. And both of them know that the other guy, if lands a clean punch, could knock him out. So I'm going to go with the over 1.5 on that fight. Drew Dober versus John Silva is an awesome mid-card action fight. I'm really excited for this one. John Silva coming in on short notice after knocking out Charles Jourdain a week or two ago. And Drew Dober, obviously always in for a fun fight. John Silva coming up the weight class on short notice. I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. He has all the momentum in the world right now, especially coming off of that win over Charles Jourdain. And I kind of would have liked to see him relish in that victory a little bit more and stay at featherweight, because that is a really big win at featherweight. At lightweight, we'll see how his skills transfer up. But I get the sense from John Silva that he is super confident in himself. And, he knows that if he hits somebody in the right spot, he can knock them out. And it's kind of also led to him sort of playing with his food a little bit in his fights against Weston Wilson, against Charles Jourdain. I mean, maybe not so much against Jourdain because he did go for the kill in that fight, but still he kind of like showboated a little bit and like, got low and like, he is a solid fighter. He's a very good pressure fighter and of course has huge power in his hands. But, Drew Dober thrives in these matchups, I think either way this fight's going to end in a knockout. It's either going to be John Silva catching Dober early because Dober's chin has kind of waned lately, or Dober withstanding the storm of John Silva and knocking him out in the second or third round. Either way, I do think this fight will not go to decision, and I think it's going to end in a knockout on either side. Next one, we have Gabriel Bonfim versus Angelusa. This is a fight that I've been kind of going back and forth on, believe it or not. I think a lot of people are super high on the Bonfim brothers, and for good reason. They're both incredibly well-rounded and just really exciting fighters. Ismail at featherweight, or lightweight rather, and Gabriel at welterweight. Gabriel is coming off of his first career loss against Nicholas Dalby, in which Dalby put on an incredible veteran performance, a fight that we picked Dalby in because of that veteran quality that he has that Bonfim had not faced yet. But he draws Angelusa here, who is uber tough, and that's pretty much it. I mean, he's a good striker, decent grappling defense, but more than anything, I think he is a very tough guy to put away. I can't remember him ever getting finished, at least not anytime recently. And, he's taken big shots from the likes of, what's his name? Jack Della Maddalena, AJ Fletcher, John Howard. Most recently, he beat Reese McKee, and, he was getting kind of beat up by Brian Battle, but the fight got stopped from an eye poke. I do remember thinking that Lusa kind of took the easy way out in that matchup. But I don't know, man. At altitude, where Bonfim lost his last fight from gassing out early because he couldn't finish Nicholas Dalby, I'm kind of feeling the Angelusa upset here. I mean, I'd like Angelusa to win, honestly. I do like the Bonfim brothers, but I don't know, something about Lusa's fighting style. I really empathize with the guy because it seems like he has all the tools, but it might be a mental thing that's kind of holding him back, so to speak. So hopefully he can get that piece together and hopefully pull out an underdog upset here against Gabriel Bonfim. But either way, I think this is a dog or pass situation. Just the value on Bonfim is just not there. If anything, maybe taken by decision because Angelusa, like I said, has been incredibly tough to finish and Bonfim is a finisher. So maybe he wins the first 2 rounds and then loses the third and gets that 29-28 or something like that. But we'll see what happens. Next, we have a very exciting featherweight matchup: Julian Erosa versus Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez, I love watching this guy fight, man. I mean, you want to talk about fight IQ. The guy knows exactly where to put himself in position to land hard strikes. He knows what to do in the in-betweens. He's always moving forward. He's always fighting hard. Great scrambler, great wrestler, very strong on the ground, and pretty solid striking as well. And like I said, you can just tell from watching him fight that he really understands the fight game. He draws Julian Erosa, Juicy J, who is always a live underdog when we see him in the underdog spot. Julian Erosa has been knocked out in the first round several times, but if you can't knock him out in the first round, he tends to really fight himself back into fights, man. He's a very scrappy, very gritty fighter, and this is a fight that I'm just really excited for, honestly. I mean, both of these guys put on great performances when they're at their best. Christian Rodriguez, I certainly think, has the momentum coming into this fight. So I am leaning towards him. I don't know if he has the power to put away Erosa early, but I do feel like he can win this fight in the third round or by decision. So I'm going to go with Rodriguez, probably over 1.5 to play it safe, but I do think he probably gets this done by decision. I just feel like Erosa is really scrappy, he's really tough, and unless you're some huge hitter, you probably won't knock him out in the first round, and that's really the only way he gets finished. So I'm going with C-Rod here. If I'm going to put a prop, probably round 3 or decision. Next, we have a slop fight. Fresh off the doo-doo grill, you have Abdul Razak El Hassan versus Cody Brundage. Cody Brundage, What can we say about Cody Brundage that we already haven't said about, Pearl Harbor or something like that? He's just a disaster. Every time he goes out there, looks like he gets tired really quick. On paper, he's a good wrestler. On paper, he's, has pretty solid knockout power, I guess. But in his fights, it looks like he's constantly quitting or making horrible decisions. I remember him beating Rodolfo Vieira on the feet and then jumping for a guillotine. I remember him constantly jumping for guillotines against Cedric Dumas and ending up on the bottom position and just losing that fight like that. He got that DQ victory over Jacob Malkoun because Malkoun was whooping his ass but landed a punch to the back of the head, or an elbow, I think it was. And then he got that legit slam knockout over Zachary Reese that kind of kept him alive in the UFC, so to speak. So now, for his troubles, they give him Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who is a really, really hard hitter and a judo black belt. So, you'd think just, based on that description that I'm giving you right now, Cody Brundage not having the best chin, kind of quitting his fights, facing a huge hitter in Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who should be able to stop his wrestling or at least negate it with his judo prowess. You'd think that this would make Abdul Razak Al Hassan a huge favorite, but you'd be wrong, because Abdul Razak Al Hassan has shit the bed multiple times in the UFC. He's another guy that gets really tired really quickly, and if he can't get a knockout very early in the fight or, completely dominate his opponent with his, physical prowess, he tends to gas out and get beat up. And Cody Brundage, as much shit as we talk about him, he is a relatively gritty fighter. And if he can get the takedowns on Razak early, I can imagine him gassing out pretty quick at altitude and Cody Brundage getting some kind of choke or a finish from exhaustion. Either way, this is going to be a slop fest, and I'm probably just going to bet that it doesn't go the distance. But I am kind of leaning towards Abdul Razak Al Hassan to blow Cody out of the water early with his punches. Probably first or second round KO. Going to the prelims, we have some really exciting fights on these prelims, honestly. There's a lot of great fights on this card. At the top of the prelims, you have Joshua Van versus Charles Johnson. This is a great litmus test for the up-and-coming Joshua Van. Joshua Van, if you guys have never seen him, if you're familiar with Petr Yan, I think that's a great comparison for Joshua Van. Maybe not in his ferocity, but in the sense that he really builds as the fight goes on and picks up all his opponent's little habits and mistakes and capitalizes on them hugely in the third round. Charles Johnson, on the other hand, is essentially flyweight Bobby Green. He likes to stay long, be slick, and kind of warm up into the fight and find his shots in the second and third round as the fight goes on. I do feel like Van is the more well-rounded fighter, and I've seen Johnson lose some really close decisions because he doesn't push for it so much, and that is just something you don't have to worry about with Joshua Van. He's going to push for it the whole fight, especially in the third round. So I expect this fight to be, if Joshua Van can pick up the first or second round, I think the third round is going to be really exciting, and I think it could go either way. But I am going to lead toward Joshua Van just because I feel like he gets off earlier and might be able to find some defensive mistakes in Charles Johnson's game as the fight wears on. But I'm really excited for that matchup. A lot of these fights I think are going to breed very exciting matchups. Dober, John Silva, Orosa versus Rodriguez, and Van versus Johnson mostly. But there's a couple more that are pretty awesome that we're going to talk about right now. At women's flyweight, you have Jasmine Yazoo Davicius versus Fatima Klein. Fatima Klein, main training partner of Erin Blanchfield in Jersey, so very strong grappling base. And she draws Jasmine Yazoo Davicius, who is kind of a prospect killer right now at women's flyweight. Jasmine had a pretty solid career in Invicta, came to the UFC, and has been doing very well, honestly. Lost to Tracy Cortez. And lost to somebody else I can't remember off the top of my head now. But regardless, most of her fights in the UFC she's won. She lost to Natalia Silva early. So yeah, I mean, she's doing pretty well. She's coming off of a absolute beatdown of Priscilla Cachoeira in what was probably the most satisfying performance I've seen in a women's flyweight fight in a long time, or in any women's fight in a long time. So you got to think her confidence is an all-time high. She is the more proven fighter versus Fatima Klein, but Fatima Klein is a very dangerous one. I just feel like Jasmine has the tools to negate the grappling of Klein. I know Klein is very talented, but coming in on short notice in the altitude, I have a tendency to kind of side towards Jasmine, who has been training for this date, and just seems like a really strong fighter in all areas. So I'm going to side with Jasmine here, but I'm excited to see what Klein can do in the UFC. Next, we have a bantamweight scrap between Montel Jackson and Damon Blackshear. This is an awesome fight. I'm really excited for this one, too. Blackshear is a very slick grappler. I believe he has a twister, if I'm not mistaken. In the UFC, probably one of like 3 or 4 I can think of. I remember, obviously, Bryce Mitchell has one. Excuse me. Korean Zombie had one, and Damon Blackshear has another. So I think there's only been 3 that I can think of. And one of those goes to Blackshear. So the dude is pretty slick on the ground, pretty strong wrestler. Montel Jackson, on the other hand, has a solid wrestling base as well, but really makes his money with his hands. He hits very hard and knows how to find his shots. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's a fight where he has like 3 or 4 knockdowns in one round. So the dude certainly packs a punch. It's going to be interesting to see how Blackshear can hold up to that. I think if Blackshear can get this fight to the ground early, we're going to see him really start to put the pace on Montel Jackson, but I'm a big Montel Jackson fan, so I'm probably going to side with Jackson here, but I really don't know who to pick, honestly. This fight's going to be awesome either way. Next, you have Luana Santos versus Maria Agapova. I am very confident in Luana Santos in this fight. She hasn't shown a ton in her career so far, but she has shown that she can finish fights, and Maria Agapova has gassed out really badly in a lot of her fights whenever it doesn't end up with her dominating her opponent early. So at altitude, I'm going to side with Luana Santos. I believe she'll get it done in the second round, but either way, I'm going to go with her by finish. Josh Fremd versus Andre Petroski. Andre Petroski, I just feel like has regressed so much. I used to be really high on this dude. He has good power in his hands. He has a good grappling game, sweet guillotine. And, I think his gas tank is another one that really has yet to be seen, or yet to be, it's been suspect, his gas tank. His last fight, he got knocked out by Jacob Malkoun's hip when he went for a takedown. So it's just, I don't know, man. I kind of feel bad for the guy. I'd really like to see him get back in the win column. And against Josh Fremd, who is not the most athletic fighter, I could see him kind of smoking him early. But if he doesn't, he's going to gas out really hard in Denver. Josh Fremd is a gritty fighter, very tough. And I can see him getting a finish in the second or third round here. I'm going to side with Josh Fremd. But I'd really like to see Andre Petroski get back in the winning circle and kind of, reclaim his hype, so to speak. But, we'll see what happens. And then you got a welterweight fight between Evan Elder and Darius Flowers. Both guys have put on exciting fights so far in the UFC, so I'm going to be excited to watch that one regardless of what happens. So just to put everything together real quick, put out the betting slip. Starting from the top, I'm going to take Rose Namajunas moneyline. I'm going to take the over 1.5 in the Ponzinibbio-Salikov fight. I'm going to bet that the Dober-Silva fight ends in knockout on either side. I'm going to stay away from the Bonfim fight, but I am going to take Christian Rodriguez and Joshua Van, both over 1.5. And I'll take Luana Santos to win in the first or second round. So I'm going to put that all together. We're going to round robin it, and hopefully we're going to make some money this weekend. Next week, we've got a pretty decent card with Amanda Lemos taking on Verna Jandiroba. I'm pretty excited for that matchup. It should be an interesting one. There's a couple other good fights on there. The return of the Iron Turtle versus Brad Tavares. You've got, Cody Durden coming back. You've got Duho Choi fighting Bill Algeo. I love that fight. And Luana Carolina versus Lucia Podulova, which is an awesome one as well. And pretty soon we're going to be talking about Edwards versus Muhammad too. So, thank you very much for watching, y'all. Thank you for sticking in. And, check out our interview with Basel Hafez. Pretty soon we're going to put out one with Jacob Estevez as well. So I appreciate y'all, and have a lovely night, y'all. Appreciate you. Let's get this money. Peace.